Now we hear all the dingings. Good thing my dog is not reactive to doorbell chimes. I'm trying to think. I think had a dog here. I don't know. Oh, my cousin's dog was here once and we were doing a Zoom thing. And then as everybody was clicking in, it was chiming and the dog was like losing his mind. I'm like, I don't know how to shut that sound off.
It's not an actual doorbell.
Right?
Virtual
Yeah.
doorbell.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just telling somebody for October, at my one facility, because we're enrichment based, so we try and do what we call urban lifestyle skills. The week before Halloween, we actually played door chime sounds on our phone, and then we all yelled trick or treat.
Oh,
Um,
that's fun.
yeah, we had a client that said it was the best thing ever that her dog was not reactive at all
Nice.
um, during trick or treating. And I was like, well, you brought your dog three times that week to daycare, so it got lots of doorbell trick or treat.
Nice.
Yep, yep. Yeah, and then it was crazy. Like I Googled, Halloween trick-or-treating sounds, and it actually had like kids giggling and yelling. And
Oh,
so
nice.
we're
Got the
just
whole
walking around
experience.
daycare, like holding our phones, making this crazy sound. And then
Gotta-
we wore like capes and just weird costumes too. And like we'd put on a mask and then take it off and just
Nice.
kind of desensitized to the best of our ability. But yeah, it was kind of
Gotta do
funny.
the fireworks before 4th of July.
Yep, we do that the week before 4th of July. Yep. Yeah, so we play fireworks sounds and then try and mimic just a few things like banging noises and things like that in the daycare environment. But yeah, nope, the fireworks sounds, we definitely do a lot of that.
Nice.
By the end of the week, we're like, yeah, we're over it. Oh, I love everybody chiming in with where they are located. It was a gloomy day here in Wisconsin. It was very rainy this morning, which we needed. We desperately needed. Um, but yeah, I had to do a couple changing of the shoes and socks, and then I was actually at daycare today doing let outs and had to throw my sweatshirt and my coat in the dryer. It was drenched. I was like,
Oh
well,
man.
I mean, I could have been smart and put on, the waterproof boots and the raincoat, but
Takes a whole other level of work to do.
right. Yeah, it was just so much easier just to walk outside.
Yeah.
My big puffy down coat that was drenched, and then I smelled like
Oh,
wet goose. So,
that's that is a very unique experience.
all the good things, all the good things. Yeah, I think we're supposed to have rain tomorrow too, but again, much needed. A lot of the storms and stuff have kind of bypassed us, and we
Mm.
didn't have we didn't have a very harsh winter as far as like snowfall goes, so
Hmm.
we are needed. So,
Yeah, we're
all
supposed to
right.
get up to like 85, I think, this week, so it's gonna be warm.
Nice. Yeah, that was the only downfall. I had to turn the heat back on in my house. So it
Oh.
was like air conditioning the last 2 weeks and then today heat, but it's fine.
Oh.
It happens. All right, we are 5 minutes after. So this is being recorded. If anybody needs to bow out or you want to refresh yourself and watch it again with your management team, certainly. Oh, we got the Australians on. I love it. Um, yeah, so we'll record this. Usually takes us several hours for it to process with the recording, so be patient in getting the email, but you usually get the email within 24 hours. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Maddie Warner. We've known each other, I think, for 3 or 4 years now, at least. And I put my management staff through her Ready Pet education program. We feel very well prepared. As I said, we had some thunderstorms a week ago, and there was a tornado watch, and my staff knew what to do. They knew the protocol because we had talked about it and had laid the plans in place. So it's great to actually be prepared for emergencies. I know we have some folks in Kentucky and again the Appalachians that just had some devastating tornadoes um, this past week. So I think emergency preparedness is something that we all know we need to think about and talk about. But the big thing is, where do we start, right? Everybody's got a lantern. Not all of us have generators. We all have slip leads, hopefully. but just helping us kind of work through that program. So without further ado, this is Maddie going through the emergency preparedness for pet businesses. And where do we start?
Thanks, Eve and Kristen. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to work with you guys. You always have a great group of folks with you. So I'm really excited to be here tonight and kind of share some of my knowledge with you all. I just kind of want to start with a story. This case just happened in Salt Lake City, where I'm based out of, about 2 or maybe 3 weeks ago. There was a doggy daycare that has a dock diving pool. They do overnight boarding, cats, and I think some exotics and grooming out of their location. And they had a bomb threat called into their facility, which it's the first time I've heard that in the pet industry. I've heard it in other industries, of course, hospitals or schools or government buildings, but they had a bomb threat, and the emergency responders and stuff decided that it was credible enough that they wanted to evacuate the entire facility just to make sure, just for a little extra, precaution. So yeah, they ended up evacuating about 200 dogs to the local humane society. It turns out it was a fluke. There wasn't actually a bomb, thank goodness. But it is a very interesting world that we're living in these days. I mean, natural disasters we know are a thing. They've always been a thing, but there's a lot of other moving parts that we face. So every day I get up and I hope that I don't see any news about pet care businesses in this way. But unfortunately, there is a lot of interesting things happening in our world. So it is good to, take one step at least into this emergency preparedness. So hopefully I can give you guys some first steps to take there.
Well,
And then
I didn't enjoy that story at all. That it was not a
I'm
good bedtime
sorry.
story, Maddie.
I know. I wish I could get on here and just be like, you know what, cuddling kittens and puppies, but that's
Yeah,
not
but
my
it's
industry.
yeah, no, but it is true. I mean, um, yeah, you wouldn't expect it in our industry, but at the same time, we do say crazy cat people, but there's people love their pets and people can be disgruntled and employees can be disgruntled and it's just
Yeah.
one of those things that we need to be prepared for.
I have a little anecdote that I've made up that I like to kind of make as a joke. That's, if you're ever lost in the woods, just start talking about dog training and 10 people will come out to argue with you and then you'll be found. So
Okay,
there
that
are
is valid.
people
That is valid.
there are people who have very big feelings about this industry and about the practices, everything from PETA to everything that you can imagine. So people can just act crazy. So anyway, getting started here, let's hope that my technology will work. There we go. Okay. If there's any issues, please let me know. We were having a little bit of technology stuff when we got started. So if you can't see it or something goes off, let me know. So just a little bit about us so you kind of know where this information is coming from. So like you mentioned, my name is Maddie. I've been teaching pet first aid and CPR classes since 2018, and then doing emergency preparedness consulting just in the last about 2.5 years. Wait a minute. Nope, it's been longer than that, since 2020. So about 5 years. We have a couple of instructors and we work with veterinarians. So we're a pretty small team, but we have reached students in all 50 states and 3 other countries. I've heard there's some Australian folks on here tonight, so we'll make that 4. So thank you for coming from all the way across the world there. We teach 3 primary courses, like I mentioned. So we have a pet first aid for pet owners. It just kind of teaches them the basics of what they should know about owning a pet, keeping medicines and supplements locked up and how to recognize those sorts of things. And then we also have a course that we created specifically for pet professionals. So this includes everything in the pet owners course, but also includes things like disease prevention and sanitation, group management, doing owner interviews and check-ins and those sorts of things that are essential to working as a pet pro. And then our newest course is our emergency preparedness for pet businesses specifically. This is the course that Eve has taken and put her staff through. So it's about a 4 to 6 hour course depending on your learning style. And it's going to cover a lot of what I'll go over today. And we can talk more about it at the end if anyone is interested. But a little bit about my background and how I came into this weird niche here. So I started working as a vet tech here in Salt Lake City when I was a teenager, worked at both family practice and then critical care clinics. Then I switched to the human world. I don't recommend switching to the human world. Pets are better. Became an EMT and a firefighter. I currently work as an emergency manager in Salt Lake County and have worked almost every kind of frontline role in the pet industry. So I've done doggy daycare, I've done bathing, dog walking, pet sitting, hiking, you name it. I've done it. So I have lots of real world experience there. And I have also managed a couple of pet services facilities, and I'm CPACO certified in that way as well. And then I want to make sure that I'm providing high quality content. So we reference a lot of industry professionals. All of our first aid is veterinary verified. We go through it each year, update it to make sure it's up to date with all the newest research and guidelines. So that's just a little bit about us and kind of what we offer. Oh dear, let's see, computer. There we go. So why is emergency preparedness important? In our day of social media and news, there's very little things that are not going to get captured by the media. People love animals. That's why most of you are in this industry. But if something major happens, it's going to be on the news. This bomb threat was on the news. Luckily, this instance of a doggy daycare fire up in Washington had a good outcome. They saved all 115 dogs. Their facility was backed up to some storage units and like an auto repair shop. So everything was fenced in. So they essentially just let all the dogs out into that fenced area and they were able to save them. As we know, unfortunately, there's not always a great outcome, but luckily this one was. And then, people get very litigation happy. If you guys may have had an upset customer who's already threatened to sue you over something frivolous, but there are cases of people going to court with pet care facilities. So the compliance and liability piece is also very important in emergency preparedness, and we'll talk about that as well. And having a relatively unregulated industry can be very confusing for owners, operators, and managers. What is expected of you? For most people in most states, all you have to do is have a business license and maybe a kennel license and you can operate. There's no real standards. And there's, good and bad things to that. As this article shows, it can be more expensive to have to comply with a bunch of new rules and regulations and governmental oversight. However, in some cases, people could argue that it's needed. So how does being prepared really benefit you and your business? Primarily, what people have reported who I have worked with is that they have peace of mind knowing that they and their staff know exactly what to do, when and how and with who and what each step is that they have to take. So if someone comes out of the daycare playroom, say, I think this dog is bloating, they know exactly what to do. They know who they're calling. They know what vet they're going to. They have the paperwork in place. They have the finances in place. And it's going to be a stressful situation, but knowing what to do takes a little bit out of that. So that is a huge benefit to this. It can also reduce the severity of damage done by whatever disaster or emergency happens. And that's really important to the survival and the longevity of your business. In emergency management, we call this mitigation, so reducing the harm that happens, and we'll talk more about this as well. Obviously, if you can save lives, if your building, heaven forbid, caught on fire, but you have a solid evacuation plan in place, no one gets left behind, you're all taken care of, and reducing physical harm as well. Your business can recover. It knows what steps it needs to take to recover, so it's set up for long-term success. Very important. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and they're super important. And of course, they're your babies, so we want to make sure that they stay around. And then we support the community as a whole. A big part of what I do as an emergency manager in the kind of government arena is helping people know what they need to do to be prepared. Having a kit at home, so if power goes out for a week or two, you're supported there. Having backup water, having fire extinguishers. Unfortunately, in major disasters, the first responders are very quickly overwhelmed So it is important to help be prepared yourself as well as support your neighbors and your community. And being prepared obviously builds trust with your clients. If, take the bloating dog, for example, if you act quickly, you act effectively, you get that dog to the vet, save that dog's life, that builds an incredible bond with that client. And I've heard many stories of people saying that their clients say they will never go anywhere else because they have such peace of mind with the business. Now, a lot of people get overwhelmed with preparedness. That's kind of why we're here tonight, to figure out what steps to take. But another piece is the financial overwhelm. It can be like, well, I don't have time to build all these kits and buy all these supplies and do all these expensive trainings and stuff. But just so every dollar spent on risk management and mitigation efforts, it saves $4 in future damage response and recovery. So it is really worth it to invest in that now, even if you have to take it in little baby steps, one major thing every 6 months or one small thing once a month can really save you money in the future as well. So let's talk a little bit about what preparedness actually is in depth. So we have a couple of, we call these pillars of preparedness. The first one is prevention. So if we can prevent an emergency from happening at all, that is the best case scenario. So an example for this in your business would be, we have 2 sets of doors from any pet care area to the outside world to prevent a loose animal. Unfortunately, a local business here had a grooming dog that was wearing a lead kind of around the neck and under the shoulder because they had a collapsing trachea, managed to get his leg through the slip lead, press it off his head, and then push his way out the front door. And then they were chasing this dog on a busy street for about 30 minutes before they could get a hold of him again. So,
Maddie, you're just giving us more nightmares.
I'm so sorry. This business is interesting where I get to get on, up in front of people and say, I hope you never have to use what I teach you. And I'm sorry that you have to imagine these things. So hopefully you don't have to with your business.
But truly, no, to your point. So when my staff and I sat and went through your course, I mean, I think it gave them an appreciation for having the conversations of the what ifs.
Yep. And that is a big key thing of, some people are embarrassed to start with preparedness, which is a normal thing of be like, well, it's 2025. I should already have this. I don't want people to know that my business isn't prepared right now. And you just have to start where you're at. We don't want perfection to be the enemy of progress. So having those conversations and walking through those nightmare scenarios allows you to think through how you'd handle them. So it is really important, if not uncomfortable. So
We ate pizza while we did it and had ice cream, so it was fine.
perfect. Yep. Staff meeting with ice cream sundaes. We love it. So the next pillar we're going to talk about is mitigation. I touched on this briefly in the last slide, but this is reducing the severity of damage in emergency. So this would be anything that is within our control to kind of help things be not quite as bad. So an example of this in your business would be, we've trained our staff in pet first aid and CPR so that we can detect an emergency early. With conditions, say like poisoning or foreign bodies in our animals, we want to catch them before they show many outward signs and symptoms, because by that point, that poison is already into the internal organs to the point where it's causing symptoms. So things like that could be considered mitigation. Another thing in mitigation, we're coming into the warm season. Everyone's mind is on wildfire. Here in the United States and California this January, we had a huge, devastating wildfire. It forced the evacuation of several pet care facilities, including a Best Friends facility. So doing some wildfire mitigation, making sure the brush is pushed far back from your facility, you have your evacuation plan and route in place. All of those things are going to be really helpful. And then detection is an interesting one. Some people are like, what do you mean know when damage is being done? Like, I'm going to know if my building is on fire. So of course there's obvious times when detection is going to be like, okay, this is happening. but there are a few times where you may not know. So a big one here is things like your cash count at the end of the night. If you're not verifying that or having someone else verify, someone could be taking a 20 every night and you wouldn't know for months. And another thing with detection would be something like your smoke alarm. If you haven't tested or changed the batteries in your smoke alarm, you may actually not know when your building is on fire. So a good piece to remember there. And then response. So actually responding to the emergency, trying to stop the damage or reduce the damage, or, reverse things even. So if an animal goes into cardiac arrest, we're starting CPR. Or if your building is full of floodwaters from a recent storm, we're going to bring in a disaster cleanup crew to start cleaning up after that. And then lastly is recovery. So we want your business to keep going for many, many years in the future, and we want to get back to normal as fast as possible, including getting back to making money as fast as possible. So that's why recovery is an important piece. One thing I suggest doing is anytime you have an emergency in your facility, doesn't really matter how big. If you have a loose animal, if you have a fire alarm go off, if you have a medical incident, hold what's called an after action meeting. And this will include everyone who is involved, and you can even include people who weren't if they can be allowed to learn from these issues as well. So you sit down and you say, what happened? Could we have prevented it? And if so, how? So we can make these changes. What went well in the response? What could have gone better? And how is everyone doing? Obviously, emergencies are very stressful. Some people might need some temporary counseling or some time off or something like that. So just make sure that you're checking in with people there as well. Your after action also may include other members of the community, like your immediate neighbors or the pet owner, or something like that, just depending on what happened there. So what does it mean truly to be prepared? So what this means, and the work that we have done over the years, is your business needs to have written plans that are realistic, compliant, especially with OSHA, known, because if they just sit on a shelf and collect dust, they may as well be toilet paper, and practiced. It is one thing to sit and read something on paper, and it's a whole other thing to get hands-on and actually do the thing. And it means that your staff feel safe and knowledgeable about what to do. Remember, we talked about that was the number one thing about why it was important. And then you have all the appropriate kind of safety nets to catch you. So things like first aid kits and supplies, insurance and finances, and then community and industry relationships. So it's easier for you to respond and recover. So another quick story for you here. I was working with a pet business owner. This was a facility that I was managing. It was my day off, and the owner came in who was not super hands-on with the business and just kind of covered as they could and as they were needed. And I get a phone call and she goes, I think I just really messed up and I'm wondering if you can hop on the computer and help me look at our system, our booking system. And I was like, okay. So I get on there and she's like, I clicked this box, and then when I went back, every single vaccine for all of our clients was deleted. And unfortunately, it was permanent. We couldn't recover this information. So we needed to go in and change permissions so people could not access this particular section of the software to do this. And that was a big issue because, now that created more staff for our front desk, or excuse me, more work for our front desk staff. They had to call a bunch of vets, call a bunch of owners who were confused. They were like, I just submitted my vaccines. What do you mean they're all gone? So things like that really slowed down the business. It cost in staff hours, it cost in stress. Luckily, this was small enough that it did not, end up in anyone leaving the business to go elsewhere, but it definitely could have, depending on if things had gone differently. So I think this is a really kind of poignant statistic here. So this is taken from FEMA, that 40% of businesses will not reopen after a natural disaster. And that is very sad to me And I think that it doesn't have to be that way if you're thinking about what you would do if one happens and how you would recover. So, with all of that in mind, where are we going to start? I've talked about how important it is. I've told you guys some scary stories. So, where do we actually start? You have a lot of things to do with your preparedness. These are kind of the top 12 items that we have determined are important in your preparedness activities. So you can see that these can take a lot of time to do. So you're gonna need to break it down here. And I can come back to this slide at the end if people would like. But we are gonna start with a hazard assessment. So this is something that you guys can go and do in your business tomorrow. So what you're going to do is you're going to sit down and you say, okay, what hazards does my business face? We have to know our enemy in order to be able to face the enemy and kind of deal with him there.
When we went through this, there, like, when you had civil unrest in there and cybersecurity, I was like, wow, like I hadn't given those a whole lot of thought, but we needed to. And so that was those two were huge ones that we had kind of like brushed off that we now are developing a plan.
Yeah, and civil unrest, as we kind of talked about with the bomb threat, so it's becoming more and more prevalent, and it really, a lot of it depends on where your business is located. You don't have to be participating in any sort of thing, but if you're in a downtown area on a main street right below, say, your city's capitol building, you could be cut off due to a protest or parade or something like that that could really disrupt your business by no fault of your own, or anyone, making an error, but just by the nature of what's going on around you. So that is a big one. These are the more common ones that we have seen in the industry. There could be things outside of this that could be a risk to your business, but in your time running a pet services business, you're almost guaranteed to have some sort of pet health problem. That's just part of working with living creatures. You might have something as small as a dog with an abrasion on its paw pad, or a groomer accidentally nicks their ear or something like that. So hopefully, if you experience any of these, they're small. But looking at things like earthquake, here in Utah, we are talking about the big one every day. We're like, any day now, we're overdue, we're overdue, we're overdue. And if this big one hits, it is going to be devastating for the region. So what can we do to prepare for that now? And cybersecurity is becoming a very interesting one, especially with AI. We have a whole new host of threats based on AI, and a whole new host of threats based on world events and kind of the politics that are happening in the world. We've seen a big uptick in that. So those are important things. So we need to know our enemy. You can do this exercise pretty easily. Get out a sheet of paper tomorrow as you're sitting in your business, or even at home if you're going to get interrupted at your business, and just write down, like, okay, we could have a pet health problem, we could have a wildfire, we could have a hurricane, we could have this. And that'll give you kind of an idea of like where to start. There's a few different types of risk that come with these hazards that you're facing. So the first one is financial risk. And this is the one that puts a lot of businesses out of business, is because they don't have the finances to recover. You have a reputational risk. This one is more based off of your operations. So if people are unhappy with the way that you're running things, or if you get negative reviews online and you just don't address them ever, and then you lose customers based on those reviews because they're never, dealt with. And that's not to say to get online and fight with people over reviews. I've seen that happen as well. Of course, be professional, but just kind of explain what happened. You have operational risk, things like lacking appropriate staff training or even staffing levels. So an example of this would be, you have one person closing, they're frantically trying to feed all the animals, let them all out, make sure everything's locked up. And as they're leaving, they forget to lock one of the doors. Now that door is unlocked, and you have a whole bunch of risk that could come in that way. You have compliance risks. So those are things like letting your business or kennel license expire. Some states do have laws and regulations more in depth for pet care businesses. So being outside of those, or having plans that don't align with OSHA's expectations. And lastly, we have strategic risks. So that is for the longevity of your business. You're not steering your business in the right direction. So that could be adding or taking away a favorite service without doing market research or asking your clients about it. So there's just some info on risk there. So as you are looking at these hazards and these risks, we're going to look at three main areas here. So our common or known issues. We know that our chances of having a pet health or pet injury are high, something that we know has happened. We're going to look inside of our business of what has happened in the past at our business. Have we had a fire alarm? Have we had someone leave a door unlocked overnight or not do the cash count or, whatever that way? We're also going to look at historical problems outside of our business. So you can do this really easily on Google. You just type in your city name and historical disasters. So Salt Lake City historical disasters. You'll see that we had an earthquake in 2020, right when we went into lockdown for COVID. So that was a fun one as an emergency manager, thinking, okay, are we going to evacuate into shelters? But we're also trying to deal with the pandemic. If you are in the southern United States, you're going to have a list of hurricanes, tornadoes for our folks there, tsunamis, and all of those things, history repeats itself. And typically those problems due to climate change are getting worse. I did recently learn that climate change is causing earthquakes to be more common and more severe because the water from different areas is putting more weight on the tectonic plates, which is making earthquakes more likely. So that is an interesting change. But do a little research and find out what's going on in your area. And then we want to address the highest risk ones. Even if they're not super likely to happen to us, we want to address them so that we can be prepared. These are the things that would for sure put us out of business. So a catastrophic fire, and wildfire, kind of those things that we know that we probably wouldn't be able to recover from. So you can use this list that you create and rate each item from 1 to 3 with how your rating of the priority that you want to address it. So here in Utah, wildfire is going to be a high one for us. I'm going to put a number 1 by that because I need to give more attention to that. But a tornado in Utah would probably be a 3 for us because we've only had, one, I think, in the last 100 years. So it's relatively low, but it still could happen. If that makes sense. So you have your hazard assessment done. So where do you go from there? You have the information. What are your next steps there? So the primary thing that you need to develop in your business is your emergency action plan. What this is going to do is tell you what to do in pretty much every emergency, but just the basic steps. So in order for this plan, which is required by OSHA in most states, I am not sure about Australia or if you're in another country, but I would assume that they have similar requirements for staff safety and health. But in order for it to be OSHA compliant in the United States, it has to have these items here that are listed. So your emergency alerts. So that goes back to detection. How do you know when something is wrong? So things like your fire alarms, your CO alarms. Do you have an overhead paging system that you can tell people that there's something happening? You have to have evacuation plans. So this includes where are your exits, how are they marked, and things about your animal evacuations. This is a tricky one. In most states, according to OSHA, you cannot ask or require your staff to attempt to rescue animals. It puts their life at risk. In most states, you need to leave that to first responders, but that is a tricky one that you need to list out.
So I have, when people ask like, well, do you have staff that spend the night? And I said, no, because the reality is, if I did, I can't ask them to rescue your dog. I can't ask them to put their life in danger. However, I have a, motion detection system that calls me and calls the police if I don't shut it off in 30 seconds. You can have a fire alarm system, again, that makes that phone call to the fire department. So there's other things you can have in place. Because yeah, it is hard. I mean, would half of our staff try and save the animals? Probably more than half.
Yeah.
However, you as the employer, and I know I've talked to my lawyer about it, I've talked to my insurance company about it, and they're just like, you can't ask them to do it.
And it is truly heartbreaking because if there's a fire at a doggy daycare, the media makes people who go save the animals the heroes. And of course, like we are all animal lovers. I would want to save my animal in a burning building, like no question about it. But if it is on paper legally, you have to specify that you cannot do that. And you have to tell your staff in training that as well. And if they decide to act of their own accord, that is not a choice that you would advise them to do, putting their life and safety at risk. But when we go back to thinking about mitigation, there are things that we can put in place to help keep these animals safe until first responders can arrive or the conditions pass by. So things like fire sprinkler systems are incredibly good at putting out fires and keeping the environment safe until firefighters can go in and deal with it. Those are obviously expensive, so you would have to save up for those if you don't have them currently. But kind of like Eve mentioned, there are some ways that you can make things less harmful and kind of set yourself up for success, even wherever you're at right now. And then create a wish list for the future. Like, yeah, one day we would love to have a fire sprinkler system. One day we'd love to have 1 or 2 staff that stay overnight, or whatever it looks like for your business. There's not one like perfect business for the entire industry, despite what some people might argue.
Yeah, like in my city or state, the fire department comes through every 6 months and does an inspection. And we've gone over with them like, hey, if you had to come into our building and it was full of smoke, like how would you guys know where to go and what to do? And how can we make sure that that we maximize the animal saving opportunities? So yeah, I've had those conversations with my local fire department and invited them in, and we've had really good conversations about it. So at least everybody feels like at least they have an idea of how we could move forward.
Yeah, and there are going to be some disasters and emergencies that we cannot do anything about, which is really hard to kind of face. And we are very action-oriented people. We want to do as much as we can to help, and that is a lovely, trait to have. But there are some times where we just simply can't do anything. Some of these wildfires in California, the firefighters wanted to come in and save like the homes. The people were evacuated, but they really wanted to save the homes, but it just wasn't in the cards. We can only do what we can do, and at some point we do have to like make peace with that, and that can be really hard. But going back to kind of this OSHA compliant emergency action plan, you'll need to have accountability. So a way of making sure you know who was in your building, did everyone get out safely, where are your meeting points? And in accountability, you can also have a way of accounting for animals so that when the firefighters show up, you can give them a list and be like, there's 16 dogs and 3 cats and they're in this room. That way you know that everything's accounted for when you come out. Critical operations typically do not apply to pet businesses. These are things, say, like a mining or manufacturing facility, where they would have to shut off machinery or something like a major oxygen tank or a fuel tank or something, that if they didn't continue or shut down operations, it would make the emergency much worse. So you don't really have to worry about critical operations there. And then you need to specify medical and rescue duties. In the pet industry, this is pretty much going to say I'm leaving medical and rescue duties to first responders. As we just talked about, we can't really ask people to put their life on the line to save others or to save animals. So you can say if someone is CPR first aid trained, they're welcome to do what's within their skill set. Otherwise, we're just going to call 911. And then lastly, you have to have contacts. So who wrote the plan, who can be contacted about it if there's questions, and any other relevant contacts. So like animal control is a good one to have. Pet poison control is another good one. So just kind of that information there. So emergency action plan is the very minimum of what's required of your business to be prepared, but it's definitely not where we're going to stop. The next step that you will take, hopefully, is to do plans for specific kinds of emergencies. Your emergency action plan gives you the basic steps to take in most scenarios, but there are certain extra steps you're going to want to take for specific disasters or emergencies. So let's take a pet health emergency for an example. Who is allowed to drive the animal to the vet? Who's allowed to contact the owner and when? Who's paying for what? All sorts of those things will be outlined in your emergency specific plan. And then next we want our continuity or our longevity plans. There's kind of two plans within this umbrella here. The first one is going to be your recovery or your continuity plan. That is going to be, how does your business recover from a disaster that shuts you down, and how quickly are you going to start making money again? So let's say you're shut down for a fire or something. They come in, they rehab the building, but you're not fully operational. So you can't do daycare or something. What other services could you do in the meantime to start making money again? Could you do pack walks? Could you do training at the park? Could you do individual dog walking? Those sorts of things, having them listed out so you can say, oh, this is an option, this one, but not this one. And then the second one here is, what do you want to happen with your business in your absence? So heaven forbid something were to happen to you, whether you get really sick or you have go down in a plane crash or something horrible, hopefully never. But what do you want to happen with your business? Who needs to do what? Sometimes that might just be, I want our business to close, and it'll just go with the rest of your estate. But otherwise, if you're going to pass it on to a family member, or you have like employee stock ownership or something that needs to be distributed, that needs to be listed out in this plan. And then hopefully you have policies and procedures in place currently, and those will need to be updated based on what you create in these plans. There are certain policies and procedures that are safety and health related that will kind of play off of these things, like your workplace health and safety, your security policies, your online and technology use might need to be updated a little bit based off of what you create here. And then past making plans, there are a few other things that we are going to look at. And things like community engagement. You can't do preparedness alone. There's no such thing as an isolated business or individual. You have to connect with your community. So there's a couple things we want to look at here. Your immediate neighbors. So if you are in a strip mall and next door you have a restaurant and the other one you have a dry cleaner, go check with them, say, hey, we're working on our preparedness. Do you guys have a plan? What is your plan? Where's your evacuation meeting point? And just kind of give them the basics of your business. Like, we run a 24-hour operation, or we close at 6 p.m. There's no animals, there's no staff on site. So if you hear something or you see somebody, please call me at this number. That's going to help bolster your immediate neighborhood. And then I'd recommend contacting your industry neighbors in your county area. A lot of people are adverse to this one because they're like, well, I don't want to reach out to my competition. Like, that feels weird. But it's really important because, take the bomb threat example. This facility had to evacuate 200 dogs. If you had to evacuate 200 dogs, where are you going to take them? They were lucky that they had an existing relationship with the Humane Society. They had already talked to them about an evacuation and it was in place. Otherwise, you're just at the mercy of whatever is around you. And that is not actual preparedness. That's just hoping and praying. So reach out to your other local industry neighbors. Say, hey, do you want to grab a coffee? I'm working on my preparedness. Maybe I could share some of the stuff I learned with you. And, if we needed to arrange transportation, do you have a bus? Do you have vehicles? In a pinch, could you take some of our dogs? And it's another great way to connect with them is to do referral sharing. So say you don't do dog training, but you have a dog that flunks out of daycare, you could refer them to these trainers and maybe get a kickback or whatever you guys set up, and vice versa. So there's a lot of benefits to this. I really don't like the dog eat dog world competition thing that happens in some areas. A rising tide lifts all ships. So if you can be that person to reach out with, the olive branch, if you live in or if you work in a competitive area, it can go a really long ways. And then lastly, connect with your emergency and compliance agency. So like Eve just said, she invites the fire department out every 6 months, come walk through our facility, come see what we have going on. I will let you know that most fire departments have 3 different platoons. So they work 48 hours on, 96 off. So just because you get one fire crew to walk through your building, I almost guarantee it's not going to be the same one when they come back again. I don't want you to get overwhelmed thinking you have to have every firefighter in your city come to your facility, but at least, reach out once or twice a year to have them come through. In some places it's required, but a lot of places it's not. So I would just invite them anyway. Offer them cookies or coffee or something. They'll come out. Or if you have a dog that they can play with, they like that a lot too. Another place to connect with is your OSHA department. A lot of people are like, I want nothing to do with OSHA. Not about to get fined up here today, but I would reach out to them, go to them with your emergency action plan and say, hey, is this compliant for our state? Because each state has a different OSHA that is a little bit different from all the others. And if you go to them of your own accord, they are very nice. They are very helpful. Some states even have awards for preparedness and risk management specifically. So you can have your business listed on their website as a highly prepared business. And another thing is, if you invite them in, say, hey, I want you to come walk through our business. We're trying to, make sure we're compliant and reduce our risk. In most states, they cannot fine you on the spot for just coming in on an optional walkthrough. Now, if they show up at your door for a full inspection or if there's a report, that's a different story. But if you call them and say, hey, will you send somebody out? In most states, they will not fine you on the spot. If, say, you have a bunch of power connectors all tied together or something, they'll just be like, hey, we need you to fix that. That's not safe. So definitely reach out to them. And then you'll need some kits and supplies, a good first aid kit in a couple different areas in your business, or if you have staff that travel to people's homes, a good first aid kit. And then we want to make sure that we don't let anything go to waste, so that we're checking on these and we're also practicing and getting hands-on with them. Even I've talked before about fire extinguishers. You can go to Home Depot, it's probably $25 now, but you can get a little fire extinguisher, take your staff out in the back, have them spray it, even into the dumpster, but just so they get a feel for using a fire extinguisher goes a long ways.
Yeah, my staff, when we did this exercise, they all said it was so not how they imagined it was going to shoot out of the fire extinguisher. One of my staffers worked in a manufacturing plant for 20 some years, and she said this would have been helpful in the manufacturing plant to have had a hands-on training of how to use a fire extinguisher.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to we're talking about, you can have a plan written down, but nothing replaces the hands-on practice.
Yeah.
So that's an option. Practice having your staff at least watch somebody turn off the utilities to your building. So turn off the power breaker, the gas, things like that. Some fire departments, if you ask them or tell them, hey, we're doing fire safety, they will bring out what's called a burn pan. And it's a big metal pan, and they basically light a little fire in it. And then you can actually put out a fire with a fire extinguisher. So some fire departments will offer that if you just ask them. So good things to have for your kits and supplies. And then lastly, you need to train your staff. Like I mentioned, you don't want your plans to become dusty shelf decorations. So you need to pull those down, get your staff going through it. And you also need to know how to manage emergencies and do risk reduction as management and ownership, which is a whole topic on its own. There's more. There's always going to be more. These are just some first steps for you guys to take. There's other things like finances and insurance and all of that big world out there. So those are some next steps for you there. Oops. So just to summarize kind of the steps to take for your preparedness, start with your hazard assessment. You can go do this tomorrow. Get your sheet of paper, write down everything that could possibly ever happen. Google things that could happen, and then rate them so you know what you're facing. Then you can actually start writing your plans, including your EAP, which is your emergency action plan, and your policies and procedures. You train your staff, you connect with your community, and then at least once a year, you update these plans and check back on them, because as we know, things change in our business, things change in our communities. You should be pulling it out anyway to train your staff. So if you are interested in learning more, like I mentioned, we do have a couple of courses available. Our preparedness course, we have, let's see, 30 topics, 30 plus topics. Everything from animal stress management, sanitation, disease control, odor control, building design, medication administration and management. We have day-to-day operations. So all of this stuff, if you are interested, please just go visit our website. It's all available here. And if you are a current member with Dog Handler Academy, there is a discount available as well. So I can have Eve send that out at the end if people are interested. Otherwise, I'm happy to take some questions, or if people have stories or want to walk through what ifs, happy to do that as well.
There's always so many what ifs, and I think that's the piece that we hope never happens. And it's one of those where, like, in the back of my head, I'm like, well, if I don't think about it, then it'll never happen and it'll be fine. But it doesn't mean that your staff don't worry about stuff. And if you haven't had the conversation with them, I can tell you they do worry. They do see things in the news, things show up on their Google feed, and if you don't address the conversations with them, then it's setting them up for failure. So super important. When I had my staff do this, they actually all came over to my house. They jonesed on the couch, and we had snacks and pizza and ice cream and all the good stuff. And we went through everything I had it hooked up to my TV, and we went through it piece by piece. And one of the things, I'm in a city environment, so when we talk about wildfires, I was like, yeah, not a big thing. But it is a thing because of air quality. When there are those air quality issues because of wildfire from Canada's blowing down into the state of Wisconsin, we were super mindful, and actually we're changing our air filters and trying to add more filtrations to our HVAC system to try and purify that air before it came into the facility. Because we were seeing dogs that were getting kind of goopy eyed and sneezy, and we're getting the allergens in, and it wasn't something we would have thought about. We're like, oh, air quality, yeah, okay, we'll shorten up how much we're outside. But just thinking about how that's all sucking into your HVAC system. And then Maddie, you talked about, like, does your staff know where to, kill the power to your building? Same thing, if there's somebody mixes Fabuloso with bleach and creates a mustard gas experience, do you know how to shut off your HVAC system so it's not going to pump that into the other areas of the building? Those are all crazy things that we didn't anticipate thinking about, but now we've started to build plans around all of those things.
Yeah, and unfortunately, experience is a great teacher. Something that we talk about on the compliance side is regulations and laws are written in blood a lot of the time. So if you can learn from anybody else's experience, like, please do before it happens to you. Hopefully it never does, of course. But it's Murphy's Law kind of thing. So the better you can be prepared is ideal.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know in the various Facebook groups, when people talk about, hey, we just had this happen, or, we're dealing with this. And I always think of, oh, hadn't am I at risk for that? And really asking yourself those questions, and or just bringing it up in your manager's meeting of, hey, this was in a Facebook group. This is how they handled it. Let's have a discussion about it, just so that way we can determine, does it need to be in our plan? Um, and what does that look like for us? So,
Yeah.
um, and I can tell you, so the first emergency preparedness plan that I did, I think I'd been open three, maybe 4 years. And my local technical college, um, the EMT course, they have to do some emergency preparedness. And so they used my facility as their project. So they handed me three different plans for, evacuation. And one of the groups that I gave an A to had actually talked to our city's public transit and had coordinated. So if there is something, we'll get the dogs to the outside play area. They'll bring a city bus. We'll load the dogs onto the bus. There's a lumber yard that has warehouses close by. We'll take them to that location, and then pet parents can pick, like, they had all of that figured out for me. And by golly, do I make sure that I touch base with those entities every year and be like, hey, so this was our emergency plan. Is this still a good plan? Because yeah, how do you evacuate 200 animals, right? Like, we don't
Yeah.
have that many on site, thank goodness, but you have to think about, in mass quantities, how does that look? Um, and what's the best way to handle the situation? So,
Well, then
um,
all it takes is a new director to come in, and suddenly that humane society you were going to use is no longer an option, and they didn't ever tell you because they didn't know or whatever. So
right.
touching base is super important and staying up on them.
Yeah, okay, so here's my scary nightmare situation. I had an alarm system, a smoke alarm system, um, that I had bought from a company. I'd found them at Super Zoo actually many years ago. And once a year, we burn some sage and put it right up next to it. And the alarm goes off. And then they call me. It's a live operator. They call me, say, hey, you have smoke at this location. And when we were doing our yearly tests, we did it. I didn't get a phone call.
Mm.
And we are like, oh, let's go. Maybe the batteries were already dead on this one. Let's go try another one. And tried another one. Didn't get a phone call. No, the company had shut down and gone out of business.
Holy crap.
No notification, no
That's so
nothing.
scary.
Right? Like, if I didn't have it in my yearly check these, I wouldn't have known.
Oh man. Yeah,
So
trust but verify.
trust but verify. Yeah. So we have a yearly action plan that, we go through. We just automatically change batteries and everything, in our lanterns and our smoke detectors and all of our stuff. So yeah, setting off our smoke detection system annually is definitely on the list.
I
Uh,
will say if you have fire sprinklers, don't try to set those off every year because you do
yes,
know what to
yes, that
miss.
would be bad. Correct. That would be bad. That would be bad. Yeah, I'm assuming there's some way to test them in some
They,
way.
they usually have people come out and inspect them and they'll
There
test
you
them
go.
with their systems.
Yeah, don't do it yourself. Don't do it yourself. But yeah, I mean, it was a very scary thing to realize that what I thought I had in place, which was a good plan, was broken. So then I had to go and buy all new ones.
Well, I'm really glad you didn't have to learn that the hard way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So no, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, have the conversations, have the hard conversations,
Mhm.
ask your staff for input. Um, I think that is super important, because there were certain things that I was like, oh, this is how it should go. And then after we chatted with staff was like, maybe maybe a different direction would be a better way to do it. So,
And if you aren't on the front lines, working every day in the playroom or doing the grooming, taking their input seriously is super important. Sometimes we as managers, I was guilty of this when I was managing, sometimes was we sit in our office and we get in our head and we kind of forget what they're facing on the front line. So definitely take their inputs very seriously. And, if they're like, I don't think this would work if we did it this way, it would probably work, test it out and make sure. Because they are the experts that way.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, a key thing that we were missing in our action plan was how to communicate to the clients. If something were to happen, if we were on lockdown, if, we needed to change the location, how are we going to communicate to the clients? Who was going to do that communication? So that was a key piece that we realized that we had not identified in our action plan. So it was
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
it's a tricky one. We have a whole lesson on it with some scripts and stuff because it can be tricky. You never know when they're recording you or when they're going to fly off the handle. And especially if it's a sensitive topic, you want to give them space for whatever feelings, but also like sometimes you need a direction or an answer from them right away. Or if they're starting to threaten you, that's going to require that you take other steps as well.
yeah.
So, tricky.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Well, it looks like everybody is super appreciative of our little chat. Hopefully nobody has nightmares tonight when they when they go home or they start to think about it. And truly, and if you have not heard Maddie speak at conferences, you can certainly come to the Dog Handler Academy conference in this fall. We have lots of great speakers speaking at that. But yeah, emergency preparedness needs to be top on your list of things to get done. And don't be afraid to hand it off to some senior staff. Maybe have a couple of your senior staff members have a meeting, go through, figure things out, and then present it to you. So as the owner, operator, as Maddie said, you may not be the right person to do this plan. So don't be afraid to enable to your staffers to step into that role and to carry it forward. So that is super, super great.
Thank you,
Yes,
everyone. I know some people are hopping off. I just want to say thank you. I do have time for questions, so if you do have a question, please put it in the chat. But if you have to jump off, I just thank you so much for coming, and I really appreciate your time and attention, and would love to see and meet some of you at the Leadership Summit. So please check that out if you're interested. Or if you have questions that pop up later and you're like, oh, I forgot to ask her yesterday, you can submit through my website or have Eve forward it to us and we'll get back
absolutely.
with you.
Yeah. Brittany, go ahead and ask your question. Go ahead and ask your question. Kristen, thank you. She popped it up there. So our leadership summit is September 10th to the 12th in Chicago. It is I'm going to tell you it's in depth and it's fast paced. My objective with my summit is get you in, download a ton of knowledge into your brain, have you network with people and experts, and then get your butt back to work. So I try not to keep you for nonsense stuff. I try and make it all very, very in depth. But that's super, super important. Well, thank you, Michelle. Glad that you found value in this. Like I said, when I took Maddie's course, and actually I'd heard Maddie speak several times prior to, and I always took good notes and had lots of good nuggets of information that I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
It is hard. I don't want to be the scary doom and gloom of like, you need to be prepared for a fire and you need to be prepared for this. Like, hopefully I'm giving you confidence to act and move forward and not, imagine, like you said, have nightmares tonight.
Yeah, yeah. It just, I think the thing that I like when I've heard you speak and present is that you're helping us to evaluate what it is that could happen and take those actionable steps. Um, and you spell it out and you give us ideas. Versus going, everybody should have a pet first aid. Okay, great. What needs to be in my pet first aid? Like, what do I think what needs to be? Like, so things like that. So I know we've changed and adapted quite a few things at my facility, just to make sure that we've got it covered.
Good.
Oh, so this is Brady. I can go ahead and ask my question if you have time.
Yes.
So I'm in the process of opening up my own dog resort in Phoenix, and I've gone back and forth in my head on the topic of having someone stay overnight. To your point, so do you see any risk in having a person stay overnight? Because I know to your point, Eve, they can't step in and save the animals, but then they can help alert you for any like potential emergencies. Or does that actually add more risk because you're having to put your trust in an individual that could potentially be a risk themselves?
All of the above.
Yeah, it's like a
That's
double-edged
like,
sword.
yeah,
This is a really tricky one.
yeah, the other piece to think about too is, and this was in talking to my local fire department, this was something they brought up because we were talking about, people stay overnight, don't stay overnight. And some states, and I can't think of the one, there is a state that says your staffers aren't allowed to sleep if they stay overnight, like they have to stay
Mhm.
awake.
Okay.
Um, so that's the other thing to find out too.
Mhm.
Because then also, what are you going to have them do? Are they staying awake and playing video games? Are they staying awake and cleaning? Like that type of thing. But also, what my fire department brought up is where's your highest risk of fire?
Mhm.
And then that staffer should stay as close to that area as possible. So that way they can hear the audible smoke alarm.
Oh,
But
I
if you
see.
have
Okay.
like a 20,000 square foot facility and they're down in the office and the fire's back in the grooming room, which is on the other corner of the building,
Mhm.
are they actually going to hear it? So that was just something they had brought up when we had conversation. Maddie, what are some?
So there's a couple things. I think it really depends on your operations. If you have something big enough where you have a lot of dogs or, you're feeding them as they're going in and people are leaving for the night, having someone on site to be able to detect things like bloat, so you're not, walking in to, a dead dog in the morning.
Mhm.
But it is unrealistic for a lot of businesses financially or operationally. Some places are going to want two people or three people because if you have, two people in the building or one person who's keeping them accountable. So it is a very tricky question. And I think it's really going to depend on your operations and like how many dogs you have overnight, how close
Mhm.
you physically are to your business. If you're just down the street and you have cameras with motion detectors, you can run down there. That's one thing. But if you're 45 minutes away and you have 150 dogs over the Christmas holiday boarding, it could be, useful to have somebody to walk through every 30 minutes and make sure you don't have any dogs that are sick or someone that's, breaking in or shenanigans that way. So it is a tricky question. Unfortunately, I don't think there's like a very straightforward answer, especially because there's so many different hazards that apply there.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes total sense. And I was even thinking, even if we closed at 7 one day, maybe have someone come walk through at 10, to help mitigate that a little bit, make sure things are good. But yeah, I figured that was a tricky question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know my friend Andrew at LA Dog Works, he has an overnight staff person, and every hour they walk back into the boarding room, they flash the flashlight at the camera to create a timestamp, and then they walk through the kennels to make sure that, none of the dogs there have bloat or, are in respiratory distress or what have you. And then opposite of the time that they're walking through, they're spraying down the yard, they're cleaning, doing dishes and things like that. So that's just how he does it. But yeah, it is hard. Yeah. Yeah. At one of my facilities, we have an overnight staffer when we have cage-free boarders. And at the other facility, I don't have an overnight staffer. Um, so yeah, it's a horse apiece. At the other location, the EMTs are right across the street. So
You
there's
could
a
also,
benefit.
depending on where your business is, you could also, like I said, ask your local neighbors if you have a 24-hour business across the street or next door. Just be like, hey, we're closed from 7 to 6 or whatever. If you see anything unusual, please let me know. And obviously, if there's a dog bloating, they're not gonna know
Right.
about that. But that could be a temporary solution as well.
Okay. I'm going to try to find a location across from a fire department.
Okay, perfect.
Then we'll be good.
Yeah, yeah. No, and that's just it. I mean, it's um location, you know, does play a factor. And Maddie, like you had said, and again, didn't even think about it, like how far away are you um from your facility? So if you were to get a phone call, like how fast could you get there, or how fast could fire and rescue get there, or etc. So that's always the key thing. So yeah.
There's a million things to think about with preparedness. I mean, facility alone. Are you in a floodplain? Are you by wildfire? Where's the fire department? Where's the utilities? What are you like? You can really go down all of these rabbit holes, and you should eventually. But again, don't try not to get overwhelmed. Just take one baby step at a time. Take your time to get there, even though we're like, oh my gosh, we need to have our preparedness in place. We can have this taken care of. Don't let perfection be the enemy of progress. So one step at a time, think about these things, talk with people who've been in the business like Eve, like your local industry neighbors, see what's worked for them, what hasn't. And you can kind of, like I said, learn from others in that way too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fire risk in the summer. Volcanic
Volcanic.
eruption. Oh my word.
That is a tricky one.
Yeah, I have a horse trailer with a bunch of crates in it. Like that's like my brain immediately is like, you need to like haul butt and get out of there.
Those are hard because is it going to be a catastrophic eruption, or is it going to be a slower creeping lava kind of eruption? That one's challenging. Like people who live or have businesses up near Yellowstone National Park.
Mm.
Like I said, there are some things. If you have a catastrophic volcanic eruption a mile from your facility, there's not going to be a whole lot. It's going to be grab what you can and get out as fast as you can if you can. But if Yellowstone blows up, I mean, even here in Salt Lake City, we might pretty much be cooked. So it's one of those things where you address the risks that you can in the best way that you can. But if you do have a creeping volcanic eruption, that's a little bit of a different story. Just have your evacuation plan very solid for something like that. You're probably going to have to leave roughly a 10-mile radius. So you'll have to be planning not just in your city, but what's in the southern part of our state or our area, So if it goes, you won't know about it. Yeah. That's one of those things of we can only do what we can do, and we'll do the best with that, but sometimes things, nature is gonna nature.
Yeah, yeah. Eesh. Well, you make me thankful that I live in Wisconsin, Joe. That's all I'm gonna say.
Joe,
As
I
I'm
hope
shoveling, snow and 20 below zero weather, I do remind myself that we don't have, different natural disasters in my area while I'm shoveling snow with 5 layers on.
I hope that volcano is quiet, quiet, quiet in your whole lifetime.
Goodness gracious. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, we will let Maddie get on with her day. Thank you all so much. And again, feel free to reach out to Maddie. She is a wealth of information and a wealth of knowledge, and super, super happy that you were able to pop on. And then we will get this recording out to all of you in the next 24 hours at the latest, but as soon as possible. And if you want to hear more from Maddie, certainly join us in September. That will be super exciting to dive deep, and you'll fill at least 2 pages of notes. I guarantee it. Guarantee at least 2 pages of notes. At least that I do every time. So I made some additional notes tonight too of things that I'm like, I'm not sure I put that in the plan, but I definitely want to just double check it. So perfect.
Well, thank you for having me, Eve and Kristen. Thank you again for everyone who's still on. I really appreciate you guys having me.
Fabulous. All right. We'll see you all next time.
All right. Bye-bye.